Guys, as we get ready for our journeys into trying to achieve creative and financial independence, something that for artists and particularly for poets can be a daunting task, one that's very unfamiliar, one that can feel impossible. I think there's some things that we want to consider because I firmly believe that this is something that's possible for us to achieve, but there are some things that we want to consider. There are some real hard conversations we need to have with ourselves if this is a journey and a path that we want to take. Today, we're going to be discussing the idea of quitting. We're going to be discussing the concept of trying to become the world's best at something. And we're going to be discussing a situation called the dip. All of this is inspired by a book or an audiobook I've been listening to by Seth Godin, the marketer that I've mentioned before. This book is called The Dip, and it's going to be something that I think can really help us move forward in our venture towards, again, creative and financial independence. Good morning, guys. Good evening. Good afternoon. Welcome to Arts and Offers. This is the podcast, video podcast by Diverses, where we talk about trying to bridge that gap between poetry and business. What are the considerations we need in order to make this really happen for us? My name is Jeff. Today we're missing our co-host, but that's okay. We're going to be talking about some key things that we need to be considering in our own entrepreneurial and artistic ventures. There's a couple things I want to take a look at as we get started. Good. So what I just put on screen, this is a picture of what the dip looks like. Again, taken from Seth Godin's book. You can see there it starts off with growth, and then there's this area where it kind of bottoms out before growth again. This bottoming out is called the dip. In learning, it looks very similar to what's called a U-shaped curve. Again, I'm a pronunciation coach. One thing that we see with language learning is sometimes when a beginner first learns something, they're actually using it correctly, but they don't entirely know what they're doing. It's kind of like an accident. Then as they learn more, their performance actually gets worse. And then as they learn even more, then the performance starts to pick back up again. This is something that's very common in learning. We're going to encounter this, honestly, in all aspects of life. Whatever thing you take seriously, whether it's a sport, whether it's learning a new skill, or in this case, starting a business around a creative pursuit, this is going to be something that we are going to encounter about any endeavor that we take to a higher level, where at first we're excited, we're motivated, we push through, it's a fun process for us. But then as we're in it longer and we start putting in more and more hours, we start for a time seeing fewer and fewer results, or results that we're looking for. This moment is called the dip, and this moment can last for some time. There's that old adage that, a lot of the people that you know as overnight successes have been working for 10 years, 14 years, 14-year overnight success, 10-year overnight success. It's the same idea here. Whatever we're going to be pursuing, in this case, art is a means of supporting ourselves independently, we're going to encounter it. So we have to be not surprised when it occurs. It's going to look something like this. And if we are willing to persist and continue to put in the work, then on the other side of it is success, the success that we're looking for, however we determine that. But it's hard because you can see it's a long process. It takes a long time to get to the other side. So we need to be asking ourselves, how long am I going to be willing to stick with this? Am I going to be willing to stick with this? Because the honest answer is maybe I won't be, right? There are other curves as well that Seth mentions in his book. For instance, he mentions there are things that he calls cul-de-sacs, where we're putting energy into a process, into a goal, but there actually is no real endpoint for us. It gets stuck. There is no moment where things pick up again. So we need to be able to identify, is what we're doing an actual dip, or are we in what, again, is called the cul-de-sac? So we have to watch out. A final example that he gives is called the cliff. The example he gives for the cliff is something where you can think of it like cigarettes. Cigarettes, there's this like growth, and then it just all falls apart. You may be thinking, how cigarettes tied to that? Well, you can think that cigarettes were designed to be very, very addictive. The longer you do it, the harder it is to stop doing it until there's the end point where everything just falls apart and everything fails. Okay, so we have to be able to identify, are we in cul-de-sacs, are we on a cliff, or are we actually in something where it's just a dip and it's going to be worth moving forward through. Okay. Some ways that he describes for talking about trying to identify, are you in a dip or are you in another curve? Trying to see, are there other models around you? If other people have done it, there's a chance that, hey, you can do it too. It is just a dip. If you're alone in it, hey, there might be a very limited chance for us to break through. So trying to find models in similar fields, people doing something that's similar to what you're doing. Okay. I'll be honest, all this work we're putting into with this creative entrepreneurship in a way with regards to poetry, I don't really have a ton of models. There's a chance that everything we're doing right now with the verses and the platform and the writing and the supporting poets, there's a chance that it's not going to work. Most other things you see involved with poetry are nonprofit based or philanthropic. To approach it from a more for-profit model is something that most poets aren't really considering. So there's a high chance for failure. I don't believe that's the case, though. I mean, that's why I'm here, right? But there is that real possibility. And I think that's also part of leadership is you have to be willing to say, hey, what I'm proposing might not work. It might not get us to where we want to go. Are we willing to persist otherwise, though? Some things for us to consider. Besides that, let's again go to a couple of graphs that I think are going to be helpful. So we introduced the dip. I think that's something that we need to always kind of be mindful of. Besides the dip, what else do we need to be considering? Seth suggests trying to become the best in the world at something. Why do you want to be the best in the world? Well, because there's a concept called Zipf's law. Okay. This is a demonstration of Zipf's law. These are ice cream flavors. Or no, we'll look at ice cream flavors in a moment. These are box office sales for top 10 movies. I forget what year this was. Okay, but we have like Invincible, Talladega Nights, Little Miss Sunshine, things like that. When you think of top 10 lists, sometimes the way people expect the distribution curve to look is they expect it to look like, okay, well, number one's here, number two's here, number three's here, and like kind of like a steady drop off. When in reality, what we see is the difference between number one and number two is massive. Like the most frequent word in English, I think it's like the, appears like twice as frequently as the next most frequent word. There's a huge drop off between number one and number two. So this is why it becomes very important for us to, when we're deciding what we want to be pursuing, how are we making our connection between our art and our business, our means of survival, we want to pick something where we feel like we can be the best at it. One example that Seth gives in his book is that if you have a health problem, what you want to do generally is you want to find the best person to solve your health problem. If you have, for instance, a type of cancer, you're not busy trying to find, like the second or third person who's good at, curing you. You want to find the best person who's good at curing you, So there's just a huge, massive drop off between number one and number two. And you can see that here. Number one, that movie Invincible got twice as much in sales, or more than that, compared to number two. We can see that also, for instance, in ice cream flavors. The difference being even more drastic. So that first flavor that you see right there, that is for vanilla versus the second most popular flavor, which is chocolate. Okay, the distribution again is massive going between number one and number two. The good news that Seth lets us know is that when we say best in the world, the word world nowadays is flexible, because the world could be, if I'm looking, for instance, for a local print shop somewhere close to me to solve my demands, I need to print out something tomorrow and get it, you know, by then. I can't turn to an online source. So for me, the best in the world for that situation is going to be the local print shop that maybe is open until 8 o'clock tonight because I have to work, and that is able to print this for this certain budget. So I can, all these factors I can put together to determine what does the world mean to me in this specific situation. And that place that's able to fit it is going to be, for me, the best in the world. So when we're picking whatever service or whatever offer we're giving to solve people's pain point, we want to be thinking about, well, what can I do to position myself as the best in the world for that specific person, for their specific need? Because that's something that we want to be considering. The last thing that I really want us to take away from Seth Godin's The Dip is I want us to think about the concept of quitting. Quitting is a word that maybe leaves a bad taste in your mouth. We've been taught not to quit. We've been taught that, oh, we just need to persevere, It's not always going to work out like that. I can tell you one of the things that I've had to do in order to dedicate more of myself in my time so that I can grow this endeavor towards poetry is I had to do things like I had to teach less. I've had to literally quit working with some students. I've had to quit some of the offers I've made. There were sorts of workshops that I used to do. There were classes that I used to run more frequently that I've cut. I've asked them. I moved away because I need to make time for something else. So we need to decide, and this is especially important if we're thinking back to the grass, or we're thinking about like the cul-de-sac, or if we're thinking about the cliff that Seth mentions. If we find that we're in one of those trajectories, then we need to quit immediately. What do you see, for instance, a lot of like high school athletes who are thinking about going professional in a sport? In elementary school, maybe they did all the things. They played basketball, they played football, they played baseball. What happens by the time they get to college? Well, they specialize. They're like, I'm just going to do basketball. Like you look at like LeBron James. LeBron James used to be great at football too, but then he just dedicated himself to basketball. It's at some point we got to kind of specialize and choose what is the area that we're going to focus all of our energy towards. Quitting is the thing that lets you do that. One of the things that I've done to help make quitting easier is, for instance, raising prices. So, I work less with students, but I'm able to bring in roughly the same amount of income just because I charge more. So that can be a way to kind of compensate if you maybe are in a position where you're like, I want to pursue poetry more, but I need something that pays the bills in the meantime. That maybe that's going to be an option for you. Is there a way that you can raise your prices so that way you can actually end up doing less work while still being able to sustain yourself? That's something that I've had to do. If you're working a typical 9 to 5, maybe that's going to be tricky. Maybe, for instance, that might mean, if you're on this journey and you're serious about it, it might mean quitting your current job to take a part-time job that maybe doesn't pay exactly the same, but it gives you enough to get by. Quitting can mean changing your space. So for instance, maybe you're in a bigger house and you're like, what, if I get a smaller house, that's going to free up some income to do some other things. Maybe it's going to do that. A lot of times quitting is hard because there's a level of discomfort. There's discomfort on the initial level. So for instance, for me, when I quit working with students, I had to raise prices. That means I had to change the marketing a little bit, right? It means I had to find different clients. I had to find the clients that were willing, that saw the value in the work I was doing teaching, and were willing to pay the different price. It can take time to do that. It can be scary, right? It's scary to move from a position of comfort to discomfort. It adds tension. But tension is also the thing that if you're trying to launch a rubber band across the room, you have to apply tension, because just taking a rubber band by itself and not doing any tension at all, it's not going to move anything. So what are we going to be willing to quit? We see this also with like services and offers. We talked about this before. It's something I've been guilty of in the past when I'm creating a service for some of my clients. A lot of times I would just load up. For instance, I have a group coaching program, and we used to meet 3 times a day. I cut it down to 2 times a day. So in telling the students beforehand, like, hey, this change is coming. It's like priming them. The people that don't want to stick around, giving them an opportunity to say, hey, you know what, that's not what I signed up for. And they can leave. And that's okay. I get it. So again, the scary thing for me there was like, hey, I'm making this shift in the business, in the product that I'm offering to students. Some students already have the product. Not everyone's going to be happy with that, and some people may leave. But it was like, hey, that's the risk I'm taking. Again, in the case of moving, it's like, hey, I can move to a smaller place with a smaller rent or lower mortgage, or I can take on a roommate. And yeah, it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, but it's going to allow me to instead concentrate more resources towards the goal. What are you willing to quit to move you closer? I'd love to hear it. Quitting can also, in some ways, almost like be taking on more responsibilities too. So for instance, like this space, what did I have to quit to get the space? Well, I also had to quit some aspects of mindset, right? Quit the mindset of like, oh, well, I can't do that with my money, or, oh, I can't do that. I can't just like get a space, or, oh, I can't, spend the time to locate spaces. Like there's some different mindsets I had to break in order to get this. But there's always going to be risk, right? There's always going to be risk. So we have to get more uncomfortable. Anyways, those are kind of just the highlights that I wanted to take away from, again, Seth Godin's book, The Dip. You can find it. It's not a very long read. I think it's less than 100 pages. Again, I was just using the audiobook version. You can find audiobooks versions of it online as well. But I think it's going to be a book that can really help you determine what's really important to you. Is what you're going through in your own artistic endeavors, are you just going through a dip yourself? For instance, you see it with YouTube too. To give an example with YouTube, again, so I have two channels, or I have three channels, but I have two channels that are dedicated just to teaching. And the first channel, I started in 2018, and I wasn't able to reach monetization on that channel until 2022. 2023, I don't know. So you're looking at like a 5-year period where you're making these videos. The video list it's like over 1,000 videos on that channel, and that's what it took. That was kind of the dip for me in just making videos. But now I've learned so much about video editing and stuff like that. The newest channel I have is this poetry channel, and we're very much in the dip right now. That's why some of people be looking at this like, Jeff, you've been at this, the channel's been alive for a couple of years now. It has as of this stream, it has 500 subscribers, and we're way off the mark for the hours needed to get monetized on this channel. Is YouTube really worth it? I think it is. I've talked about one of the reasons I think it's worth it, because for my teaching, I've seen what successful channels can do, and my channels are even that. They're not like crazy successful, but I mean, they're bringing in, my videos appearing in front of like 700,000 people per month, or like, appearing 700,000 times, not 700,000 people, but they're appearing 700,000 times. Like that's how often my videos are appearing on people's like homepages and, different platforms and things like that. So I think as a vehicle for reach, it's super worth it. But it takes time to get there. And the YouTube poetry channel is far from that. It's going to take a lot more work, but I personally believe that, hey, this is just the dip for it. We're right in the bottom of it right now. So what are we going to do? If I believe there is another side, just based on my experience with other channels, again, my first YouTube channel took 4 or 5 years to get monetized. The second teaching channel I had, that one I was able to do it within about a year and a half. I've seen what the other side looks like for YouTube, so I'm willing to wait it out and persist for the art. And I hope that if you're serious about turning art into a pursuit that really gives you that creative and that financial independence, then I hope that you're also willing to be patient while also still putting in the work, because that's ultimately what it takes. Anyways, guys, just wanted to kind of give some background on the book. I encourage you to check it out. Also to kind of just give you some updates on our own journey and see what we're doing. I will catch you guys later. I hope you guys have a good day, have a good night, and a good afternoon.